Living crisis, exemplified by your power bills, is just one symptom of an economy in decline.
This iron ore report has sent panic through Australia, and if it's legit, our economy could be in trouble.
One is that we're making ourselves more and more dependent.
But on the other hand, we're also over-reliant on China for our exports.
The market could crash in the sense that, like, lots of people are going to say, okay, look, bugger it, I'll give it a try.
This gives China the capacity to do damage to Australia's critical infrastructure during moments of international crisis.
January 2026, economic data just exposed a vulnerability pattern that state governments refuse to discuss publicly. 4 Australian states face recession risk on a completely different scale than the rest of the country. And if you live in one of these states, the exposure will hit you directly. Right now, while economists debate national GDP forecasts and RBA rate decisions, something far more significant is developing inside Australia's regional economies. 4 states built economic models that work spectacularly during boom conditions. They committed entirely to single industries. They bet everything on external demand continuing indefinitely. Then the underlying conditions shifted. China's economy is restructuring away from infrastructure-heavy growth. Global tourism flows remain below pre-pandemic peaks. And suddenly, the states that looked strongest during expansion became the most exposed to contraction. The data shows exactly which states get hit first, hardest, and longest if Australia enters recession. Measurable exposure based on economic structure, employment concentration, and external dependence. 4 states, different industries, same fundamental problem. Number 4. Tasmania. The tourism trap. The island state's economy depends heavily on industries that collapse first during recessions: tourism and discretionary spending. When households tighten budgets, holiday travel gets cut immediately. When businesses reduce costs, conferences and corporate events disappear. Tasmania's gross state product measures just $38 billion annually, Australia's smallest state economy by a massive margin. Victoria's economy is 13 times larger. New South Wales is 16 times bigger. Small economies face amplified vulnerability. A single major employer closing affects the entire state. A bad tourism season creates ripple effects across multiple regions. There's no economic buffer to absorb shocks. Tourism contributes $2.5 billion annually. That's 6.5% of the state's total output. But the real dependency runs deeper than headline numbers suggest. Food and beverage services employ thousands. Retail businesses in tourist areas depend entirely on visitor spending. Accommodation providers face vacancy rates that spike during downturns. The 2020 pandemic exposed this vulnerability brutally. International borders closed. Interstate travel stopped. Tasmania's tourism sector collapsed. Hotels sat empty. Restaurants closed permanently. Unemployment spiked faster in Tasmania than almost anywhere else in Australia. Recovery happened only because government stimulus flooded the market, and domestic tourism surged once restrictions lifted. That artificial support masked the underlying structural problem. During recessions, discretionary spending evaporates first. Tasmania lacks alternative economic drivers at scale. Manufacturing contributes minimally. There's no major mining sector comparable to other states. Financial services remain concentrated in mainland capitals. Technology and professional services exist, but at levels far below other states. Agriculture matters, but it faces commodity price volatility and climate variability. Sarah Morrison manages a boutique hotel in Hobart. Opened in 2019, survived the pandemic through government support and domestic tourism surge. Built her business model, assuming tourism would remain strong indefinitely. Now she's watching booking rates decline, corporate events getting cancelled, interstate visitors choosing cheaper mainland destinations. Her occupancy rate dropped from 78% in early 2025 to 64% by late 2025. Revenue fell 22% year over year. She employs 12 people. If recession hits and tourism contracts further, she'll need to cut staff. Maybe close entirely. She's not alone. Hundreds of small tourism operators across Tasmania face identical pressure. The island geography creates additional vulnerability. Tasmania can't benefit from commuter flows to larger job markets. Workers can't easily relocate for employment opportunities without leaving the state entirely. The Bass Strait creates isolation that amplifies economic downturns. Youth unemployment historically runs above the national average. During the last major downturn, young Tasmanians left seeking work elsewhere. That brain drain weakened the economy's long-term prospects even after conditions improved. If understanding recession vulnerability provides value, joining the channel supports our continued investigation into economic risks facing Australian states. Population growth remains modest compared to mainland states. Limited population growth means limited domestic demand growth. Infrastructure investment has improved, but still lags mainland states. That is state number 4. South Australia faces something far worse, an industry that already collapsed, taking the entire middle class with it. Number 3, South Australia, the manufacturing desert. South Australia consistently reports the highest unemployment rate among major Australian states. In mid-2023, SA's unemployment hit 4.2%, while New South Wales recorded 2.9%. That gap isn't coincidence. It reflects decades of economic restructuring that destroyed manufacturing jobs without creating equivalent replacements. Adelaide was once Australia's manufacturing powerhouse. Holden employed thousands building cars. Mitsubishi ran major operations. Suppliers and contractors supported the automotive industry across the state. Manufacturing jobs paid well and supported strong middle-class communities. Then it all collapsed. Holden closed Australian production in 2017. Mitsubishi shut down earlier. The automotive supply chain disintegrated. Thousands of manufacturing jobs disappeared. Workers with specialized skills found themselves unemployed in their 40s and 50s with limited prospects for equivalent employment. The state government promised diversification. They talked about defense manufacturing, renewable energy, technology, wine tourism. But those industries never created jobs at the scale that manufacturing provided. South Australia's gross state product measures approximately $115 billion, the 5th largest state economy ahead of only Tasmania. The state contributes roughly 6% of Australia's total GDP despite having 7% of the population. That gap matters. Lower productivity, lower incomes, less capacity to absorb economic shocks. Mining contributes to SA's economy, but at levels far below Western Australia or Queensland. Michael Patterson worked at Holden for 19 years, started on the production line, worked his way up to team leader, made good money, supported his family, owned his home. When Holden closed, he was 47 years old. His manufacturing skills didn't transfer to other industries. Retrained as a forklift operator, took a 40% pay cut, lost his home. His marriage collapsed under financial stress. He represents thousands of South Australian workers who never recovered from manufacturing's collapse. The state's population aged as young people left seeking opportunities interstate. Adelaide became the oldest capital city by median age. An aging population creates its own economic challenges. Higher healthcare costs, lower labor force participation, reduced innovation and entrepreneurship. Commercial property vacancy rates in Adelaide CBD run higher than other mainland capitals. South Australia faces a fundamental problem. It lost its major industry without finding an adequate replacement. Manufacturing provided stable, well-paid employment for workers without university degrees. The industries that replaced it either require higher qualifications or pay substantially less. During recessions, states with structural unemployment problems get hit harder and recover slower. Workers already marginally attached to the labor force drop out entirely. Businesses already struggling close permanently. The unemployment rate that starts higher climbs faster. When Australia's unemployment rises 1 percentage point, SA's historically rises 1.3 to 1.5 points. The multiplier effect amplifies national downturns at the state level. That is state number 3. But wait until you see what's happening in regional Queensland right now. Property prices already falling as China pulls back. Number 2, Queensland Regional, the China dependence. Regional Queensland, not Brisbane. Brisbane has a diversified economy. We're talking about Townsville, Mackay, Gladstone, Rockhampton, the mining towns built entirely on resource exports to China. These regional centers experienced extraordinary property price growth in recent years. Townsville's median house price rocketed 28.66% in 12 months to $695,000. Mackay saw similar gains. Investors poured money into these markets assuming mining boom conditions would continue indefinitely. But underneath those price gains, a dangerous dependence has been intensifying. Queensland's mining sector generates 12.9% of the state's gross value added. Coal dominates. Liquefied natural gas matters significantly. Both depend overwhelmingly on Chinese demand. China is Queensland's largest export market. Iron ore, coal, LNG, beef, lamb, all flow predominantly to Chinese buyers, and China is slowing. December 2025. Data showed Australian LNG exports fell to a 4-year low. China's imports dropped 21% year-over-year. That's structural demand destruction as China's economy reorients toward domestic consumption. Iron ore prices remain elevated but face downward pressure. China's property market collapsed. Infrastructure investment declined. Steel demand weakened. Coal faces even more concerning long-term trends. Global decarbonization efforts target coal consumption. China committed to peak emissions by 2030. Queensland's thermal coal exports face declining markets. Mining employment in Queensland hit record levels during 2024, approximately 134,009 positions. But that number started declining in 2024-25 as projects completed. Here's the brutal mathematics. These towns built everything around mining: schools, hospitals, shopping centers. All exist because mining companies pay high wages. When mining activity contracts, everything collapses simultaneously. Job losses reduce household spending. Businesses close. Property values fall. Workers leave seeking employment elsewhere. The towns that boomed become the towns that bust. David Chen moved to Townsville in 2021 for a mining job. Earned $140,000 annually operating heavy machinery. Bought a house for $480,000. Seemed affordable given his income. By late 2025, his employer started reducing shifts, cost-cutting. His income dropped to $95,000 annualized. His mortgage payments stayed the same. He's now looking at selling, but property values already declined 8% from peak. He represents thousands of mining workers facing identical pressure. Gladstone depends heavily on LNG processing and coal exports. The port handles massive volumes. But what happens when those volumes decline? The town lacks alternative economic drivers at scale. Mackay services coal mines across the Bowen Basin. Property values surged during the recent boom, but coal mining faces structural decline globally. The problem isn't that mining will disappear overnight. The problem is incremental decline without replacement industries. Mining towns don't transition smoothly to service economies or technology hubs. They boom or bust based on commodity demand. China's economic model is shifting. The infrastructure-heavy growth that drove Australian resource demand for 2 decades isn't coming back. China is moving toward consumption-driven growth, services, and domestic production. That means lower demand for Australian coal, iron ore, and LNG. Not zero demand, lower demand. Enough to matter significantly for regional Queensland towns built around maximum production capacity. If this analysis provides value, joining the channel helps deliver continued research mainstream outlets avoid. Property investors who bought in Townsville, Mackay, and similar towns expecting continued price appreciation face serious risks. These markets can fall 30% to 50% during resource busts. It happened in Western Australian mining towns during the last downturn. That is state number 2. Regional Queensland's China exposure creates serious vulnerability, but the next state makes Queensland look diversified by comparison, an entire state economy that's 48% one industry serving one customer. Number 1. Western Australia, the mining monoculture. Western Australia's economy is a mining monoculture on a scale that no other Australian state approaches, and that makes it the most vulnerable state in Australia if recession hits. Mining contributed $61.6 billion to Western Australia's economy in 2024-25. That represents approximately 48% of the state's total economic output, nearly half. Queensland's mining sector contributes 12.9% of its economy. Western Australia's mining sector contributes 48%. No other state comes close to that level of industry concentration. Western Australia's mining industry employed 134,009 on-site full-time equivalent positions in 2024-25. But the real employment impact extends far beyond mine sites. FIFO workers, equipment suppliers, logistics companies, professional services, construction firms, retail and hospitality serving mining communities. Tens of thousands of additional jobs depend indirectly on mining activity continuing at current levels. Iron ore dominates everything. Western Australia produces roughly half of the world's internationally traded iron ore. Annual export value ranges between $80 billion and $90 billion. Think about that. One commodity from one state generating more export revenue than entire national economies. The customer concentration is even more concerning. China buys the overwhelming majority of Western Australian iron ore. When Chinese steel production declines, WA iron ore demand falls immediately. There's no alternative market at sufficient scale, and China is restructuring its economy right now in 2026. China's property sector collapsed, infrastructure investment slowed dramatically. The economic model that required massive steel consumption is shifting towards services and consumption. That means lower steel demand. Lower steel demand means lower iron ore imports. The mathematics are brutal and inevitable. Iron ore prices spiked during 2021-2022, reaching $230 per ton. Prices have moderated but remain elevated. But price volatility creates its own risks. A sudden price collapse would devastate Western Australia's budget and employment simultaneously. The state government depends heavily on mining royalties. When commodity prices fall or production volumes decline, state revenue collapses. Budget surpluses turn into deficits. Infrastructure projects get cancelled. Public sector employment contracts. Western Australia experienced this exact pattern during the last mining downturn. Property values in Perth fell 20% peak to trough. Unemployment spiked. Businesses closed across the city. Workers left the state seeking opportunities elsewhere. The migration reversed. People who moved to WA for mining jobs during the boom returned to eastern states during the bust. Why is this so? Because Western Australia built an economy with no meaningful alternative to mining at scale. Manufacturing barely exists. The state's small population limits domestic market size. Tourism contributes, but at levels far below Queensland or New South Wales. Perth lacks the natural attractions that drive international tourism. Agriculture exists in wheat belt regions, but faces commodity price volatility and water scarcity. Financial services and professional services exist primarily to serve the mining industry. When mining contracts, these sectors contract simultaneously. And here's where it becomes brutal. The state's isolation amplifies downturns. Perth sits 3,300 kilometers from Sydney, 3,600 kilometers from Melbourne. Workers can't easily commute to eastern states for employment opportunities. Businesses can't easily pivot to eastern markets. The tyranny of distance that mining companies overcame through massive capital investment becomes a trap during downturns. You're stuck on the West Coast with limited options when the single industry dominating the economy faces headwinds. Rebecca Taylor works as a project engineer for a mining services company in Perth, earned $155,000 in 2024. Her company services iron ore mines across the Pilbara region, the heartland of Western Australia's mining industry. In late 2025, major mining companies started cost-cutting, maintenance programs deferred, capital projects delayed, exploration budgets slashed. Her company's revenue fell 18% year over year. They've stopped hiring, started reviewing staffing levels. She knows redundancies are coming. It's just a matter of when. She owns a house in Perth's northern suburbs, bought for $720,000 in 2023. Her mortgage assumes her income continues at current levels. If she loses her job, she'll struggle to find equivalent employment. Mining services is all she knows. It's all Perth's professional employment market offers at scale. She's 34 years old, single, supporting aging parents. The stress keeps her awake at night. James and Linda Nguyen represent the other side of Western Australia's vulnerability. They run a small construction company in Perth, started the business in 2018, built it up during the mining boom, employed 23 people at peak. Revenue hit $4.2 million in 2024. Their business depends entirely on mining industry construction and maintenance contracts, new mine facilities, worker accommodation, infrastructure upgrades. When mining companies spend, James and Linda's business thrives. When mining companies cut costs, the construction contracts disappear first. Late 2025 brought warning signs they couldn't ignore. 3 major contracts delayed indefinitely, 2 others cancelled. Their revenue projection for 2026 dropped 35% compared to 2025. They've already laid off 8 employees. They're considering laying off another 6. The remaining staff work reduced hours. James borrowed $850,000 against their family home to fund business expansion in 2023. Seemed like a smart decision during the boom. Now that debt terrifies him. If the business fails, they lose everything. Their home, their savings, their retirement security. They're both 52 years old, too young to retire, too old to start over in a new industry. They represent thousands of small business owners across Perth whose livelihoods depend entirely on mining industry health. Multiply Rebecca's situation by tens of thousands. Engineers, accountants, logistics managers, HR professionals, IT specialists, all serving mining companies directly or indirectly, all facing identical risk if mining activity contracts even modestly. Commercial property in Perth's CBD shows warning signs that insiders recognize immediately. Vacancy rates increased from 12% to 16% over 2025. Major mining companies reduced office space requirements. Sublease availabilities jumped. The market that expanded rapidly during boom years is contracting as companies anticipate leaner years ahead. Residential property values in Perth remained relatively stable through 2024 to 2025, but that stability masks underlying vulnerability. When mining employment falls significantly and workers leave the state, property demand collapses. The market doesn't decline gradually. It falls sharply as FIFO workers stop renting, families sell before relocating interstate, and investors exit simultaneously. The Perth rental market already shows strain. Rental vacancy rates increased from 0.8% during the boom to 2.1% by late 2025. FIFO workers who previously rented in Perth while working in the Pilbara are leaving the state or buying elsewhere. Demand that drove rental growth during the boom is softening noticeably. Lithium was supposed to diversify Western Australia's mining sector. The state dominates global lithium production. Electric vehicle demand promised decades of sustained growth. Mining companies invested billions. The state government celebrated the new industry. But lithium prices collapsed during 2024-2025. Multiple mining operations shut down or moved to care and maintenance. The diversification story became another boom-bust cycle on an accelerated timeline. Rather than providing stability, lithium added another volatile commodity to Western Australia's exposure. Western Australia went all in on mining. The strategy worked spectacularly during the commodity supercycle. State budgets ran massive surpluses, employment hit record levels, wages exceeded eastern states, property values soared. The economic prosperity seemed permanent. But the other side of concentration is vulnerability. When the single industry that dominates your economy faces headwinds, everything contracts simultaneously. There's no buffer, no alternative sectors to absorb displaced workers, no diversified revenue base to sustain government services. China's transition away from infrastructure-heavy growth isn't temporary, it's structural. Steel consumption in China likely peaked already. Demand for Australian iron ore will moderate accordingly over coming years. Western Australian mining companies understand this reality. They're cutting costs aggressively, improving efficiency, reducing labor intensity, automating processes. The employment model that created 134,000 direct jobs won't sustain that level if production volumes decline even 10%. State politicians talk about diversification. They've talked about it for decades, but diversification requires decades of patient capital investment, skills development, and market building. Western Australia hasn't done that work because mining profits made it seem unnecessary during boom times. Now the window for easy diversification has closed. You can't build alternative industries quickly when recession conditions hit. Companies cut investment during downturns. Workers leave seeking employment elsewhere. The economic foundations for new industries disappear exactly when they're needed most. That is state number 1. Western Australia's mining monoculture makes it the most vulnerable Australian state to recession. The mathematics are brutal and unavoidable. Half the economy depends on one industry. That industry depends on one customer. That customer is restructuring away from the consumption patterns that drove 2 decades of demand growth. If understanding recession vulnerability provides value, joining the channel supports our continued investigation into economic risks facing Australian states.